What's up guys, it's your host Spartanic Arts DxD back with another high school DxD related video, and today we have What If Issei Was Betrayed and Snapped Part 8. Now this might or might not be the finale, it depends on the title, you guys will figure out whether it's in the title, but thank you for all the support on this series. If you guys want to know exactly when I upload, join the little blue button right next to the subscribe button, and thank you for all the support. 20,000 subscribers soon, please hit the sub button, it would mean a ton, and hit the like button as well. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Chapter 27, The True Test. Isn't it obvious? We fight. If I deem you worthy, you get the spear. If not, you go back empty-handed into the thick of things, Elohim said with a nonchalant shrug. You really are a douchebag, you know that, right? Issei said with a deadpan expression. Trust me, those were the exact same words my oldest son Lucifer said to me, so it's nothing new, Elohim said as he lightly tensed his body. Well, that's rather indicative of him, Issei said as he activated his dragon force and entered into his opening battle stance. Then again, it was a bygone. Let us begin, Elohim said as he and Issei charged at each other, back to the realm of reality. So back with everybody else. Cold Gray gazed towards their manically glinting counterparts, wanting nothing more than to kill their owner. The cold gray eyes belonged to none other than Vali Lucifer, while the other set of eyes belonged to Rizavim Lucifer, the son of the original Morning Star. Vali, it's nice to see you. Are you here to meet your grandfather? Come, give me a hug, Rizavim said manically. Vali didn't rise up to the taunt, controlled his emotions before he slightly smirked and said, I see you have finally lost the last of your sanity after my brother pitifully disposed of you not once but twice, Vali finished as he gestured towards Rizavim's mangled body. That won't stop me from killing you, you brat. Maybe I am done with you. I will go after that whore of a mother who birthed you. Rizavim snarled at him. You wouldn't be able to do that since you will be dying today, you bastard. I will take extreme pleasure in watching you beg for death with every ounce of your being, Vali said as the fury evident in his voice. Now, Vali. What makes you think you can defeat your dear old grandfather? Issei had temporary control over Juggernaut Drive, but you don't. How do you intend on beating me? Rizavim asked with a sneer. This caused Vali to give out a rather dark chuckle where he said, Who gave you that idea that I can't beat you? It's true that I can't use Juggernaut Drive as efficiently as Issei, but I have an alternative that is just as good, if not better. Not to mention he will be back to face you, you old fart, Azazel said as he landed a few feet behind Vali, who gave Azazel a surprised glance while Rizavim just grit his teeth at the entry. Don't interfere in this, Azazel, Vali said as his back turned back to look at Rizavim. I have no intention to. I just came here to spectate, Azazel said with a casual shrug of his shoulders. Vali nodded before he raised his power until his aura was visible. The aura in question wasn't like his usual white one. Neither was it like his golden one. It was a mixture between white, golden, and midnight black, give it a solid shade of gray with a clear tinge of purplish gold hanging within it. The new gray aura seemed to enhance his gray eyes, which shone the unbridled power. Both Rizavim and Azazel were shocked at the output of raw power. However, surprise was soon replaced by anger with a smirk respectively. Heh, so you finally mastered that, huh? Quite the time, too, Azazel noted with a smirk. Vali did not cater Azazel with a reply and simply said, Vanishing Golden Star. In a flash of gray light, he was now covered in a brand new balance breaker armor. It was gray with the color of white-colored wings, while the gems embedded in it were golden in color. The biggest distinguishing feature in the fact that were the night black eyes that the armor featured. How do you like this, you bastard? This is the power of the Morning Star, the Vanishing Dragon and Golden Marnock Dragon put together. You don't stand a chance, Vali tauntively said to Rizavim, who snarled at his grandson before his face broke into a maniacal grin. You may have more power than me, but I will not let you have the satisfaction of killing me, Rizavim said with a crazed expression on his face after he cut his head of killing himself. However, both Vali and Azazel did not have any time to relax since the machines inside in the room lit up and showed them to the true form of the Triaxia in all of its glory. Triaxia's appearance consisted of a large breast with characteristics coming from different animals like a lion, a leopard, a bear, a dragon, bat, crocodile, and snake. It even has 7 necks, 7 heads with 10 horns, as well as 7 long, thick tails of different shapes. It also has a formed snout arms and 2 legs that are even thicker than its arms. Its main body is that of a primate, leaning forward and is covered in black fur, and what appears to be scales all over the body. Its size is overall several hundred meters long, making it significantly larger than Great Red. As Vali and Azazel looked at the beast from in awe and horror, they missed the turning of the screen in the ceiling were only turned when Rizavim's voice was heard from it. "Greetings, everyone," the transmission said cheerfully. "If you find this, then it means that someone like Sir Zex has caught up and killed me. But like any good mass manipulator, I did not leave my plans half-assed. Because of this, I used an old spell to make my soul to be the trigger to awakening the Triaxia. With all that, I want to say is toodles, ta-ta, bye-bye," the transmission said before the screen went blank. However, it was that moment that the Triaxia started to stir. "Vali, blast that thing with your strongest attack. It's not fully awake, so we just might be able to do some sort of damage to it," Azazel said urgently, as he took the air and started firing of his strongest mood with Vali, following in close behind. However, their efforts were for naught, as the attacks hardly even scratched Triaxia, who opened his eyes and glanced at Vali and Azazel. Its gaze stopped them in their tracks, after which it began to move. As soon as the Triaxia moved, Vali and Azazel flew away in high speeds. Azazel then sent a signal of retreat, causing the Alliance army to leave via their respective magic circles. They soon disappeared, just in time the Triaxia had destroyed the last layer of the barrier holding it down and started rampaging around the area. The leaders of the Alliance had already started creating of their strongest barriers around the allied territories as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation with the beast of the apocalypse. Amongst the chaos, nearly every leader, 3 certain blondes, had one question in their minds: where is Issei? Back with Issei. Elohim and Issei were locked in a fierce battle, with Elohim showing Issei why he was known as the god of the Bible, despite him only being an image of its own self. He was able to beat back Issei and his dragon force without much difficulty. "Damn, Osai, you hit very hard," Issei said as he lightly rubbed his forearm. It was slightly numb due to the force of the punch that Issei had blocked. "Well, I do have added incentive to hurt you, since you are dating my daughter," Elohim said with a nonchalant shrug of his shoulders. "I suppose I should have seen that coming. So tell me, how exactly I do need to prove myself to you? Because asking me outright to defeat you is impossible without any use of my balance breaker," Issei asked, with a tilt of his head. "Well, now that you are sufficiently warmed up, here is your task. You will have to find a way to disarm me," Elohim said as he waved the true long giantess in front of Issei. Nodding, Issei unsealed Ascalon, Skydrum, and the Red Queen. He had Ascalon and the Red Queen in his hands while he had the tail wrapped tightly around Skydrum's hilt. Elohim raised an eyebrow at the weird stance that Issei took but said nothing. Issei, however, was mentally creating the best combo possible for him to disarm his opponent. Finally narrowing his moves down to 3 different combos, he made his move. Issei then sped forward before swiping down both Red Queen and Ascalon repeatedly with the occasional 3-stroke attack whenever he involved Skydrum. The random attacks kept Elohim on the back of his foot as he wasn't able to guess or even read where the next attack was coming from. Issei, after a few moments, added a new dimension to his assault as he started making a diagonal and horizontal slashes in addition to his previous downward slashes. He was now beginning to push Elohim back, who now could not hope to just keep blocking and was occasionally dodging an inherent swipe that he could not block. Sensing his opponent's discomfort, Issei decided to speed up the things once he added upward swipes using Skydrum, all while adding simultaneous errant strikes with Red Queen and Ascalon. When Elohim was finally pushed into a corner, Issei used all 3 of his swords and attacked with 3 different angles. 1 downward strike, 1 upward strike, and 1 diagonal one. The combination forced Elohim to keep his true long giantess in a horizontal manner before the force of the 3rd swipe forced it flying out of his hands into the air. Issei then jumped up into his bedtail to put the neck spear of the air before Elohim could reclaim it and landed on the ground. He looked up to see a clapping, smiling Elohim who said, "Well, it looks like you pass." "So now what?" Issei asked as he eyed the true long giantess in his hand. He could feel the precious hesitation he felt when using the spear had replaced with a keen sense of acceptance. "Well, now, the only thing that left is giving you my knowledge on how to best use that spear," Elohim said. "Oh, and how are you going to do that?" Issei asked curiously. "Like this," Elohim said before he placed his finger on Issei's head and transferred knowledge to him. In mere moments, Issei was the ground moaning and a headache interrupted in his head, thanks to the influx of information. "Don't do that again, old man," Issei moaned out as he unhesitantly got back on his feet. "Well, now that everything is set, I have 2 favors to ask of you," Elohim said. "What kind of favors?" Issei asked with a raised eyebrow. "The first one is to keep the world safe and in some way defeat the Triaxia," Elohim said. "I will do it." "That was the exact reason for this whole excursion, was it not?" Issei asked, with sarcasm dripping into his tone. "Good man. The second thing I want you to do is ensure that my daughter is taken care of and happy. And lastly, I want you to tell her that I love her, and that I am sorry I wasn't able to give her as much time as I would have liked." He finished softly with a sad and anxious smile present on his face. "You can count on me to do all of those things, Osan. Don't worry. It's a dragon's honor," Issei said, making Elohim smile at him. He, however, did not say anything and simply checked his fingers, causing Issei to go right back into the Alliance's main camp. As soon as he appeared, he was tackled and gunned to the ground by 3 blonde blurs. While the majority of the surrounding people were looking at him to say, "Where the hell have you been?" Issei, in response to the looks, could only shrug before giving a rather sheepish grin as he scratched on the back of his head. And that is Chapter 27, The True Test. Chapter 28, Revelations and Plans. Hi? Issei said from his position under his girls as he looked at the leaders of the Alliance. "Where the hell were you? Your signature disappeared during the mission," Vali asked curiously. "We all like to know what happened, and don't think you can talk out of your way out of this one without an explanation, mister," LaFace said in a serious tone. "Well, let's get comfortable then. It was a very long explanation," Issei said with a sigh as everyone nodded and moved to sit down on the couches waiting for Issei's story. "So, this is what happened," Issei said as he revisited everything from his fight with Kao, the run with the Medusa, the appearance of the true Longinus, being transported to Limbo, meeting God, learning of the real history behind the end of the First Great War, the Longinus theory, the prophecy, the fight, and his role in all of the things. When he finished, everyone was looking at him with varying looks of astonishment. However, one person had her mind in a whole other direction. After a few minutes of silence, Gabriel stood up and said, "Excuse me, I will be going to rest." As she left, Issei stood up and made a move after her. He was, however, stopped by Michael, who was wearing a blank expression on his face. After a few moments of staring into Issei's emerald eyes, he looked down and said, "Please take care of her. She is the youngest of us all." "You didn't even have to ask," Issei muttered as he walked past Michael and soon was in front of Gabriel's door. He wasn't surprised to find it was locked, and when she didn't respond after a few knocks, Issei sighed before he melted into the shadows before reappearing in the room. He felt a heart-wrenching pain in his gut. He saw Gabriel sobbing into the pillow. Moving silently, he sat down beside her and placed a hesitant hand on her shoulder. Her blue eyes met his emerald ones for only a moment after she launched herself in and began sobbing into his shoulder. Promptly, Issei wrapped his arms around her and pulled her across until she was on top of him. He then sighed before rocking Gabriel a bit while muttering soothing words into her ears. He felt his shirt get wet but didn't pay, in fact, any mind. He had other things to pay attention to. Like one of his lovers who was still sobbing her eyes out. Her cries continued for a good while before she had gotten still. Looking down at Issei, found that she had fallen asleep. He then kissed her on the head with a sigh before placing a blanket on the two of them and going to sleep. Scene break into the other room. In another room, all of the leaders of the Alliance were sitting down silently contemplating what they had been told. A few minutes later, Azazel spoke up and said, "So what are we going to do?" he said lightly as he sipped his wine. "About what? The long term of the immediate problem?" Cerzes asked in a matter-of-fact voice. "Let's focus on the immediate concern. Triaxia has already caused massive destruction in several areas already. We need to first find a way to keep it off unaffected areas and keep the refugee camps," Azazel said. "We have been bolstered in barriers around all of our territories, but they only will hold out for so long. To survive something of the Triaxia's level, we will need a major power boost," Odin said as he gestured towards Zeus and some of the other faction leaders. Before anyone could answer or give out any suggestion, Orpheus and Lilith appeared inside of the room and accompanied by Vali, who heard them tell of the end of the discussion. Looking around, he said, "Orpheus and Lilith decided to help us in powering the barriers surrounding our faction areas, so that does fix our immediate concern." The leaders nodded in relief when they heard the news. However, the discussion was far from over. Now that this is a matter out of the way, we can now help Issei fulfill his destiny, Vali asked, looking around the room. "I will arrange for Tanin to speak with him and maybe get Tiamat on board after talking to Ajuka," Cerzek said tiredly. It was moments of the crisis like that made him wonder whether becoming a leader was worth it or not. "Well then, I guess I will have to speak with the Jurgamir and get him on board as well. The lazy snake always says he will be available when the world is at its end." "I think the situation can rightly be described as the world's end," Odin piped up. I will give him a bit of my essence and a small fragment of my soul, just like Albion did. It will be better since I can focus on putting Azidaka and Apophis down. I have feeling that both of them are ones controlling Triaxia, Crom said as he leaned against the wall, looked up thoughtfully. I thought they were both sealed, Zeus said, intrigued. They were, but just like the other evil dragons, Rizavim brought them back. The fact that they had to use their original Holy Grail stolen from the church to enhance themselves up to the Heavenly Dragon's level makes them more dangerous. I will be able to defeat one of them at a time. Both of them will be a stretch even for me, Crom informed the group seriously. I'll help you with that. Me and Orphis have been working on a move for me. It will work. Besides, Fafnir has already agreed to work with Issei for the final confrontation, Vali said with a nod towards Crom. That still leaves you. Long to contend, and I will be considering the fact that he likes to be free, Azazel said thoughtfully. I will speak to Su Wong to get him to talk to Yulong. If there's anyone Yulong will listen to, it'll have to be Su Wukong. Yakuza piped up for the first time since the meeting had begun, her words gaining nods from all around the room. I shall lend a little bit of my power to Issei-sama as well. Orphis piped up from Vali's lap, making everyone having a double take on her horrific for Issei. But no one said anything. After several moments of awkward silence, Zek stood up and then said, I think it's time for all of us to spurn to our respective factions. The people would need us now more than ever due to the circumstances flying around. Vali and Orphis will come in day by day or strengthen the barriers. Until then, everyone, good luck. Saying that he and the rest of the leaders all teleported away to their respective mansions, leaving the hero faction headquarters alone. The next morning, scene break. Issei woke up with the start before he yawned a bit. His mind then went back to the events of last night as he found himself looking to his side where he found Gabriel fast asleep. She had a peaceful look on her eyes, but it was a few tear marks from all the crying she did last night. He frowned as he remembered her tears. It left a hollow feeling in his heart. Slowly he turned around to see that directly facing Gabriel. Once he was done, wrapped his arm back around her and softly pulled her towards him until her head was under the crook of her neck. He would wait for her and would be there for her when she woke up. He knew that she was bursting to talk to him about her father. After all, among her siblings, she had the least amount of time with Elohim. It was half an hour later that Gabriel finally came out. She tried to move but found herself pinned against a smooth surface. Opening her eyes, she found herself staring into the concerned looking of the emerald eyes of her lover. Are you feeling okay? Gabi-chan, Issei asked, concerned. Yeah, I am much better. Last night information was overwhelming to say the least. I didn't think I would ever have heard father again, she quietly said. Do you want to talk about it? I am here for you, he soothingly said, trying to get her to open up. Gabriel remained silent for a couple of minutes before she spoke up and said, did he say anything about me? He did. He first praised your intelligence, saying that he could see what you saw in me. Then he kicked my ass because it was duty to at least look his cute little daughter's boyfriend ass at least once. And finally, he made me a promise to look after you. I know I can't understand a lot of what you went through all that time, but Elohim loved and loves you more than any other thing that he ever created. You were the best thing he ever created, and I could see the pain in his eyes when he told me what happened all those years ago, Issei said as his tone went from soft and amused to firm and solemn. Thank you, Gabriel said, feeling a weight of comfort shoulders as she let out a sigh. You have nothing to thank me for, Gabriel. After all, I told you the truth. Now then, I believe we should go get ready for the day. It is going to be a busy one, Issei said as he leaned down and captured her lips with a chastened kiss. He then moved and kissed her neck with a couple of minutes, getting in the bed, left the room. Gabriel only stared at him with a small smile on her face. She took her head before moving and getting ready herself. Scene break, an hour later. Issei moved towards the mess of the hall, greeting all of his subordinates, and he moved along. Tend to get a little breakfast before his day began. He wondered what was on his agenda. His musings, however, were cut short when Yoroi ran up to him in an urgent voice. Triaxia has been sighted. It's heading towards Japan right now. That's the end of Chapter 28, Revelations and Plans. Chapter 29. Preparations. Not wasting a single moment, Issei ran up to Gorg and Sieg. The former then created a magic circle and transported the trio right into the edge of the Japanese coast. The other leaders were all waiting, wearing a grim expressions. All of them were staring into the distance from the Triaxia was expected to attack them from. Following in line of sight, Issei felt fear because in the distance was the most fearsome sight he had ever seen. Standing at several 100 foot long with all 7 of its heads was the Triaxia. The next few hours was spent in relentless struggle of trying to keep the Triaxia away from the shores of Japan. However, the effort was majority futile. Any damage inflicted towards the behemoth was instantly repaired, leaving behind no scar of any mark of damage. Any attack the beast fired needed the combined effort of everyone in the alliance to stop. It was only when both Lilith and Orpheus appeared that the Triaxia left the area and back into its hiding spot. As soon as the Triaxia left, the injured and exhausted members of the Alliance all left to return to its central headquarters. That was a freaking nightmare, Vali said with a groan as he plopped down on one of the seats. And Great Red is that strong? It seems I have still more than a few years to go, Crom muttered to himself. What are we going to do? Even if we have the Gremory transportation arrays up and ready in all the faction territories, it will still be near impossible to ensure that no casualties come with the Triaxia's attacks, Issei said as he nursed a few wounds of his while looking around the room. I said you should be off the response team for a while, as Zazel tiredly said from the seat. Normally Issei would have argued, but then that the time of essence is needed, he needed to get a little soul fragments of the remaining dragons and train with said powers so as to fight that beast. He also needed to figure out how to use the true Longinus when it mattered. You are right. I will be taking the girls with me when I go to talk to the dragons, Issei said with a sigh as he ran the hand through his hair. Give me a couple of days to get Midgarson up. You'll have to talk with him on your own, but I will still need to wake him up, Odin said. Issei only nodded in reply and mentally began working up a plan, while the other leaders and prominent members of the Alliance talked among themselves on how to improve their defensive networks and their reaction time to any attack. Issei was brought out of his musings when Crom said, "Catch!" Looking up, I saw a blackish orb with tinges of yellow and flying towards it. Catching it, it eyed confusedly at Crom who said, "That's a soul fragment with my power and abilities. I pumped enough magical energy in it so that it will be ready as soon as you merge with it yourself. Good luck, now I shall be off." However, before he could leave, Issei piped up and said, "Where are you going?" "Hunting," was the only answer he received, and Crom was gone. The only thing left behind was a black mist. Issei then sighed before he stretched a little and popped his bones before leaving the room. Going back to the Hero Faction headquarters, he sent a message to Gabriel, Jean, and Lefay asking them to come to his room if they're free. He then dismissed them. Both Sieg and Grorg had taken the rest of the day off before he went to his room. As he entered the room, his shoulders sagged a bit and faced an adopted look of extreme exhaustion. It was at this moment that he completely understood the weight of his situation. Not only that he had the glimpse of what he was up against, the high expectation along with the unreal power of his opposition made his task feel if he was walking on thread. There was absolutely no room for an error. The pressure was now getting to him and it caused him to second guess more than a few decisions in battle. The result were the obvious images of his person that were currently heavily bandaged. Sighing, he focused on the orb in his hand and put it closer to his chest before channeling his magic into it, causing it to phase into him. As soon as it merged with the other gears, he felt a rush of power pass through him, causing him to shrug slightly. He was brought out of his musing with a voice book inside his head. "So this is the one I have been partnered with. Not bad. Not bad at all. The soul fragment of Crom, I presume? Do I need to explain or convince you lend me your power?" Issei asked blankly. "No, I have my original's memories. I shall assist you in battle. This may be the only time I get to face someone of that level without dying," Crom soul fragment said. CCSF. Issei mentally nodded back and cut down the mental link. He then leaned into a chair and sighed as he waited for the three mates to return. He did not have to wait for long. Within moments, the two magic circles at the cross of the light appeared, signifying the entry of the three blonde girls. Looking up, he smiled at the three blondes before pulling them into one big hug as he kept all of them close while enjoying the soothing presence that they gave him. "Issei, what's wrong?" Lefay asked softly as a few minutes of silence. "I'm just tired of it all. Triaxia is a beast without match. Seriously, no attacks work on it. And it took the combined barrier of everyone around just to stop one of its attacks. When I see the power, it frightens me, and I feel as if I won't be able to do anything," he muttered into a combined sea of blonde hair. "Oh, Issei," Gabriel said as the three blondes tightened her hold over him and offered him comfort. After a few minutes of silence, the face spoke up and said, "You shouldn't doubt yourself, Issei. If there's anyone who can do it, it's you." Jean nodded in her agreement as she said, "It's true. You have a knack of always pulling off the impossible. I agree with Feichan." Issei, by now feeling a bit of confidence returned to him. The blind belief that he would bring back fire, he had seemingly lost sight of what he'd seen in the Triaxia at full power. The final nail in the coffin was Gabriel in her point of view. "I am sure Father wouldn't even have given you the necessary knowledge or chosen you as the man to fulfill the prophecy if he thought you couldn't do it. The fact that you are actually here from the encounter shows that you can do it." Issei smiled back at his mates before straightening up and saying, "All right then, I'm done moping. Let's go and get the power help from the dragons. The girls nod and Issei then activated a magic circle, taking a foursome into Tanin's territory. There was he graded Tanin's guard after they were lead to Tanin. The 25-meter purple dragon king stood up from his throne when he saw Issei arrive and said, "I have been expecting you, Issei Hyodo. I take it back. I take it you know what I'm here for," Issei asked his old mentor. "I do. And here, I would not have given this to anyone else, but you've proven yourself worthy of my help in more than on occasion," Tanin said as he handed Issei a purple orb. Nodding his head in thanks, Issei grabbed the orb, placing it in his chest. It took a moment which Issei engulfed the purplish aura, which died down in a few moments. He felt another presence in the mindscape that told him the move was successful. "Thank you for the help, Tanin-san. Any idea where I could find Tiamat?" Issei asked hopefully. "You'll find her in the familiar forest. Though I have to be warned beforehand, she could be rather hard to handle," Tanin said, was sweetly sweated. "What do you mean, Osan?" Issei curiously asked with a tilt of his head. "Well, given your aura and strength, she will either fight you or jump you," Tanin said, just as simple as possible. "What do you mean? Why would she want to jump me? I don't even know her," Issei asked, ignorantly the sight of bristle of his three mates. "Because of your power, your rate of growth, she'll definitely be interested in mating with you, and since you already have high dragon class, and will be the future reach heavenly dragon level, she'll most likely bug you. If you want my advice, it will not be to outright reject her attempts, but to actually understand her. Maybe one day you may come to love her, just like your three mates behind you," Tanin said firmly. Sure, Osan, I will give her a chance. Anyway, let's get going, guys. We need to visit Sursex," Issei said as he turned around and started walking away. However, as he walked, he remembered that Rias was still under the dragon's curse with their health deteriorating day by day. Sighing to himself and cursing both his kindness and the red-haired female devil's pride, he clicked his fingers, lifting the curse. After all of the current climate did not allow to hold on to personal grudges, he'd deal with all of this after he had dealt with the Triaxia. Teleporting himself and the girls to the Mao's office, he knocked on the door, which was soon opened by Gabriel. Looking at Issei, she informed the foursome into the office. Issei, however, was surprised to find Visa and Ko both waiting in the office, each of the two girls holding a small box in front of them. Before he could speak, Sursex spoke up and said, Issei, just the person I wanted to see. I was just about to send for you. You, Siakasa Dono, and Odin Dono both have sent the soul fragments from Izagor and Yuhog. They couldn't leave their respective factions, so they were respective representatives in place of them. "Oh, that's good. It's nice to see you again, Visa-sensei," Coach, and Issei said as he warmly smiled at the two. "It's good to see you as well, Issei," the two girls said as they offered the small chest in their arms. Taking them with a grateful smile, Issei turned to Sursex and said, "Will it be possible for you to transport me to the familiar forest? I do need to speak with Tiamat." "Sure, I will transport you over there, but first, I think you should absorb both of these orbs into you," Sursex replied. Nodding, Issei opened the chest and placed both the parent green orb and gray orb in his chest, letting them be absorbed into his soul. When the bonding process was complete, he nodded towards Sursex, who created the red transportation circle that took the forceman to the familiar forest. "Issei, how will you search for Tiamat here? The forest is huge," Jean asked with a tilt of her head. "I won't go looking for her, she'll be coming to me," Issei said as he released his aura and let it violently fill the forest like a turret. After a few moments, he retained his aura back and patiently waited. Sure enough, the sounds of flapping wings were soon heard of the silhouette of a figure beginning to appear at the distance. The silhouette was revealed to be a navy blue celestial dragon, with no horns and a curved snout. Landing in front of the foursome, the dragon narrowed its eyes at Issei before speaking. "Why have you come here, wielder of the dragons?" Tiamat asked, her voice in a dragon from deep but still looking an effeminate touch. "Well, I see Ajuka-san still didn't tell you, huh? What happened?" Issei said as he regaled everything from his meeting with Elohim. The dragons he already had, the fact that he had come in to request a fragment of soul to use. "So let me get this straight. You want me to give you a soul fragment for my soul, and the fact that you've already gotten the souls of the other dragons that you might have needed?" Tiamat asked after he was done. "That's the gist of it," Issei affirmed with a nod. Tiamat, however, didn't answer for a few moments, which her body began to shine a little bit before it started becoming smaller until it took the shape of a human. Now standing, a 5'9", blue-haired and yellow-eyed, wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans, was the Chaos Karma Dragon. Issei had a hard time controlling his blush at her beauty. She easily rivaled Gabriel in terms of her looks alone. Walking up to Issei, said, "I'll give you my soul fragment, but I have a couple of conditions." "What conditions?" Issei asked, with slightly narrowed eyes, expecting an all-out battle to begin any moment. "The first one needs to be fulfilled immediately. I want a kiss that blows my mind. 2. I want you to take me out on a few dates and the whole mess with the Triaxia is done, Tiamat said with a grin on her face. Issei almost faltered and coughed not only to his embarrassment but also a blush had appeared on his face. Alright then, Issei said as he stepped towards Tiamat, hoping that the three of his mates wouldn't mind. Wrapping his arms around her slim waist, he put his lips on hers. He started to enjoy the feeling of her lips, the way that she was kissing. Oh my god, this is so annoying. He then lightly licked her lips on the... Okay, bro. Finally, after 15 minutes of kissing, the need air became too much to ignore. The duo broke away panting. Tiamat's face had a massive blush and a rather dazed look in her eyes, while Issei supported a rather rigorous on his face, putting his forehead against hers and then whispered, "Is your mind blown away, my dear lady?" "Oh, most definitely, my kind sir. I still look forward to our dates, but before that," Tiamat said as he raised her hand and pointed her palm upwards. Her whole body was then covered in a pale blue aura that descended on top of her palm before it took the shape of a blue orb. Handing him the orb, she pecked him on the lips one more time before flying away. Issei then merged his soul fragment with his gear and felt the presence inside of him before smiling. He then turned around to see the three blonde mites slightly put out, but the only three of them did not was to make the hell out of him, one after another. It was a goofy kissing Issei who returned to his room in the Hero Faction headquarters later on. However, he wasn't able to go to sleep immediately as he found the letter next to a golden orb. The letter was from Vali telling him that he had left Fafnir's fragment for him to use. Grinning softly, Issei placed the fragment into his gear before laying on the bed and falling asleep. And that is Chapter 29, Preparations. Chapter 30, The Hunt. In the dark of the night, we find a tall and imposing figure with the heterochromatic eyes slowly climbing up a frozen mountain in search. No, in hunting of something. This was Crom, the crescent dragon and the strongest of the evil dragons alive, along with being the only dragon at heavenly level and currently to be unsealed. Currently, he was on the hunt for both Apophis and Azidaka. He knew that the two of them had gone missing for a few days after floating island of Aegis had been stolen and hadn't been seen or heard from since. Knowing both of them personally, he knew that whatever the two of them had been planning wasn't going to be good. So here he was on the place where Azidaka had been sealed, hoping to find a trail of the three-headed evil dragon's magic so that he could track them down before killing them. Entering the plane, he enhanced his senses and started searching, hoping to find a tinge of foreign magical energy. After several hours of diligent searching, he finally found what he was looking for. Scanning the imbued aura, he caught a lock on one of his targets and immediately flew into the sky before flowing where the trail took him. Several hours and thousands of kilometers later, and away, Crom landed in front of a large cave. He knew he was in the right place given the amount of malicious magic he was feeling in the entrance. Simon Crom called out, "I know you are there, Azidaka, come out." "So you found me, huh, Crom? What is it that you need me for?" The colossal three-headed dragon said. Crom didn't answer. Instead, he began glowing in a goldish color before he transformed into his full dragon form. "I didn't need anything from you, Azidaka. I am here to hunt you." And then, without warning, he charged Azidaka before tackling him into the mountain. Crom then used his massive forearms to lift Azidaka and throw him into the air. Following that, he released a strong breath attack. The attack made contact, and a small explosion ensued. Crom did a seize attack for a moment, as he waited for the smoke to clear. He waited unsurprised when he said, "I was completely unharmed and surrounded by a magical barrier." "I don't know what you're playing at, Crom, but this assault won't go unanswered," as Azidaka snarled before he created several magical circles and fired a large strand of blast towards Crom, who simply glowed in a goldish-blackish aura. His aura protected him from the attack even though it was a direct hit. "Come now, Azidaka, I thought you'd know better. My heavenly ability, after all, is anti-magic. You'll have to take another style if you wish to survive against me," Crom said, smiling with his jaws. All three of Azidaka's heads growled in annoyance and anger before which two heads charged in the jaws, opening looking to bite Crom. Crom, in response, flew straight towards Azidaka, dodging and charging heads. He bit Azidaka on the chest while using his hand to keep his central head back. Flapping his wings sharply, he cut down the two sides of the heads before sending Azidaka into the ground via a breath attack. When the smoke cleared itself, Crom found himself staring at the snarling viz of Azidaka. His side heads were slowly regenerating as he shouted, "I was enhanced by the Holy Grail. Why am I still inferior to you? Isn't it obvious? Your so-called enchantment was a weaker version of Simple Graal and maintained by the barrier keeping Triaxia at bay. When the barrier broke, you lost all the enhancement that you made you a heavenly dragon. Now you are back to your original level. We are currently even weaker than the Dragon King Tiamat." Crom explained slowly as if it was talking to a slow child. Azidaka snarled before releasing a breath attack, promptly dodged by Crom, who after sidestepping the attack fired his own Azidaka, causing the three-headed dragon to fall into the ground with his breath attack hitting the mountain, causing it to explode. Crom then collected his aura into a tail before tackling Azidaka, and then pinning him into place with his forearms and behind his arms. He stabbed Azidaka's chest with his now aura-charged tail, causing the three-headed to roar in pain. Not wanting to leave the task half-assed, Crom opened his mouth and fired of his strongest breath attack. When he was done, he noted that Azidaka was well and truly dead. He knew that the three-headed monstrosity would reform in a few thousand years, but that was fine. For now, he had more important things to take care of. "You can come out now, Apophis," Crom called out. As he finished, the shadows on the ground shifted, and from it emerged a 100-meter long black eastern dragon. That was Apophis, the Eclipse Dragon. "How did you find me, Crom? I thought I hid myself pretty well," Apophis commented. "So you were. It was clever of you to mask your own power under the malicious aura of Azidaka, and then the whole thing was supplemented when the ambient dragon from our battle was added to the mix. But then again, you forget that I am not an ordinary dragon, and your being here just makes things a lot easier for me," Crom said as he spread his wingspan to full length and started hovering into the air until he was on the level with Apophis. "And what is it that you need from me, Crom? If you must know, I already knew this enhancement we gain is already gone. I have no interest to go through with any of my old plans," Apophis stated with a small equivalent shrug on one of his shoulders. "That may be true, but I will have to kill you. You shouldn't worry since you managed to reform in some time in the future," Crom nonchalantly said as he powered up. "I was afraid of that, but you know, this, I won't be going down without a fight," Crom Apophis said as he began to release a rather dark aura. Without a warning, both of them charged at each other and collided head-on. The force of the collision caused several of the surrounding mountains to explode. It was then that Apophis used his super serpentine body and tightly coiled himself around Crom, causing the crested dragon to roar in pain. Apophis then, using his shadow powers, created thorns on the inside and stabbed Crom, with then causing his pains to intensify. The attack was further enhanced when Apophis used his breath attack on Crom, increasing the damage several-fold. Crom cursed his stupidity inwardly as the assault continued. He should have known better than to get caught by Apophis. Shaking his head, he collected his power, a little before releasing it all at once, causing Apophis to grip to loosen a little. Using the slight advantage, Crom pulled away out of the hold before turning his head around Apophis and releasing a strong breath attack that sent Apophis into the ground. As he crashed, Crom breathed in a small sigh of relief, inspected his injuries. He found several holes in his body that were bleeding and knew they would have finish healing up soon, or else it would be himself who needed reform in the future. He once again cursed himself in his momentary black lack of concentration that resulted in his current position. However, he turned his attention back towards his opponent and decided that he will now attack them to aim to finally end this fight and kill Apophis. Releasing all of his aura, he condensed it into a single orb in front of his mouth before charging at Apophis and stopping just in front of him. Apophis' eyes widened to the astronomical levels when he saw the attack, but was too late as Crom had the time already released his attack. It was a massive torrent of golden-colored energy that altered in the entity of the surrounding landscape, creating some new place. When he was done, he landed on the ground and checked for signals of Apophis. When he found that he was transformed back into his human form and slightly winced at all the wounds that didn't match whenever it was left in a magical circle back into his cave. He would rest for a few days after getting back to full health, return to the Alliance, and informed of the two major threats that had been dealt with, and everything was a go. Now, scene break, we're back with Issei in the Hero Faction HQ. Issei was sitting in his office at headquarters with a pensive look on his face. What he had been told by all the dragons and left him with no things to procrastinate. Flashback. "There is something that I need you to know, partner," Drake firmly said as Issei was about to finish his training in his mindscape. He was getting training by each of his dragons at the respective powers. So far, it was going great. "Yeah, Drake?" Issei asked curiously. "You currently have too much draconic aura flowing through your body. Using our powers individually will not have any effect of you, but if you combine all of our powers in one attack that you plan on using to beat the Triaxia, that will have more than a few adverse effects," Drake gravely said. Issei then let out a wary sigh and he muttered, "Of course nothing can ever be as simple as smooth sailing when I'm involved." Shaking his head, then he looked up towards Drake and asked, "Lay it on me, old-timer. What's going to happen to me?" By using that move that is already of high amount of draconic aura will overflow and erupt violently. While it won't affect the spell you'll cast in any way, it will cause you to lose the last semblance of your humanity, causing you to become a full-fledged dragon, along with simultaneously breaking the seal that is placed on the boosted gear. It will cause all of the souls currently here free to go, meaning that the boosted gear will no longer be a sacred gear and I will be free. We won't exactly be partners anymore, and that is what will happen. The soul fragments here will one in a way or another return to the originals, Drake said. I see, Issei said before he turned away and left his mind skip a thoughtful expression on his face. Flashback, end. He wasn't second thinking on using this move. He had responsibility to fulfill that would only be possible with that move. He knew he would be able to get a human form with enough training, so that was covered as well. What he was worried about was, what would he do when the war ended and he was a full-fledged dragon? And how would Prometheus react when the mighty Welch dragon was once again freely roaming the skies? He bought out of his musings when a soft hand touched his shoulders. Looking up, he saw LaFay looking at him, a worried expression on her face. The sight of his mates was like a light shining through darkness, and felt the pleasant breeze of the hottest days. Turning around, he pulled LaFay close in his arms, and they kissed. Whatever. A few moments later, he broke away with a kiss, his forehead touching hers as he smiled, a dazed look on LaFay's face, speaking a low whisper so that have heard him say thank you. What for? LaFay asked, back in the same low whisper. For just being here with me, Issei replied softly with a small smile marrying on his face. No other words were exhausted as the duo just happily enjoyed the peaceful serenity of each other's presence. It was then that Issei knew what he wanted to do and missed the Triaxia would be over. And when he was finished, it would be a beautiful sight. Later on, lay on his bed with LaFay, he returned to his mindscape and called all of his dragons to him. When everyone had gathered, he said, I will go through the move and take down the Triaxia. After that, me and Drake will travel for a bit and he will teach me how to access my human form. Once we are done, I will start process of forming the dragon faction. Dragon faction? What do you mean, partner? I asked. Isn't it obvious? I will form the faction with only dragons and their chosen mates in it. We will have identity of our own, and with several top 10 classes being, we will not be safe. Not to mention my relationship with the other leaders will ensure peace, Issei said to the green. Are you sure that plan will work, Brat, the soul fragment from Cron asked. I am pretty sure it will. Besides, this will be the first time in history that dragons will stand united, Issei firmly replied. Where will we stay? Tiamat's soul fragment asked. I'll leave you guys to think that area where we can set a faction. Keep everything in mind, going from attitude to eating to elemental living and sparring. Leave no stone unturned. When you are done, let me know. I will physically start the preparations, Issei said. The dragons were now murmuring amongst themselves, not knowing whether to go to the idea or not. However, it was that Tanin stepped forward and said, the idea will work. I already have a non-official dragon faction working in the underworld. The idea that Issei Hyodo has given us is only a bigger and will have a good effect for the dragon race as a whole in the future. Before any further argument could have been instigated, Drake spoke up and said, my partner has always achieved the impossible. All of you beginning to doubt him now? After all the times he has proven to accomplish the seemingly impossible things? His words once again gathered thoughtful looks from the other dragons who were looking contemplative. Issei, close to this, leave knowing that should he succeed versus Triaxia, a new age would be installed for the world. And now we go into the final chapter, 31, called The End. Chapter 31, The End. Issei stood along the European coastline, unblinkingly staring into the yet distance. It was only a few hours till the final fight versus the Triaxia. Everything was in place. The spell charged and ready to fire. The leaders of all the other factions were ready and trained on their positions, each one having been given a temporary power boost from Apophis. Apophis had offered him a portion of her power as well, but Issei had told her to keep it as backup in case he needed a boost of power during the fight. Apophis was not completely convinced, but promised not to only stand by and wait, but also bring help if he needed it. Needless to say, Apophis was awarded with a lot of chocolate and head pats. His other preparations were already complete with Tanin, and the other free top-tier dragons had all finished their duties in securing the big patches of land and stable sources of food. Even the leaders from the other factions were in agreement of there being a dragon faction, and were currently working on setting up a number of trading lines as well. As he thought about the future dragon faction, his mind went into his three mates and his fourth possible mate. They had taken to spending as much time with him as possible. It was not because they thought he wouldn't live past his battle with the Triaxia, no. The contrary, they had no doubts that he would succeed. They did ensure that his mind wouldn't worry too much, giving him a reminder that there was a life waiting for him when he came back and won. He was brought out of musings when he felt a slight rumble on the ground he was standing on. Sighing, he looked up and knew that the Triaxia was approaching. He couldn't really see the beast at the very moment, but he could feel the effects of its very presence in its surrounding. The trees were beginning to decay slightly. The animals in the area were either reflexing, leaving the land, or being killed due to the corruption. The air itself felt heavy, cold, and unwelcome, seemed to take away all the hope, leaving behind only despair that remained after destruction. Looking up, he sighed before mentally saying, "You guys ready?" "You bet," AI said. "Let's go, Hebu," Drake said. "Izuko," Crom said. "Of course, darling," Tiamat cooed. "I was born ready," Yulong arrogantly replied. "I shall assist you to the very end," Issei Hyodo, Tanin said. "Let's just hurry up and get it over with already. I need to go back and start collecting me some panties," Fafnir boastfully said. "Sure, as long as I get to go back to sleep, let's do it," Midground muttered with a yawn. "I already told you the answer months ago." "Let's do it, partner," Vitra said. Smiling at his friend's words, Issei felt the energy of his dragons flowing inside his body. He then balanced all the energies before muttering, "Dragon's aspect, overdrive." Immediately he was covered in a multicolored light. When the light died down, he was seeing the armor becomes colored of a mix crimson and black, and a second pair of dragon wings appear on his back, totaling in 4. The gems on the armor were in 8 different colors, signifying each of the dragons he was currently hosting. Issei opened his eyes and stared at his armor with some kind of awe to it. No matter how much times he entered this form, it always left his breathless. He shook himself out of his super when the tremors around him grew stronger. He knew that it was now time to take action and finally end this mess. Creating several communication circles, he said, "Alright guys, I'm going in. Wish me luck. Make sure that all the barriers are in place." After receiving affirmative answers, Issei nodded to himself before he flew into the distance, determined to meet the end of Triaxia. After an hour of continuous flying, Issei finally caught sight of the Triaxia. It was impressive and terrifying as always. Taking a deep breath, he started channeling all of his magic energy into his arms before he started chanting. "Dominating fires of the Portugal flames, strength of 1,000,000 collapsing meteors, supreme ice of the frozen Cocytus, calamity of a warmed and final end, creation and destruction of all life, accursed energy ending of once captured, rest and eternal rest with no rise, take away all the despair and fill it with hope, darker than the black of the starless night, emptier than the endless void, an abyss deeper than infinity, a dream stronger than reality. Heed my call, answer my prayer, internal black hole." Immediately, a black hole formed itself in front of Issei before it moved towards the Triaxia, expanding to colossal size as it did so. All 7 of the Triaxias roared in agitation as they felt a strong force pulling it apart. The black hole was sucking in at Triaxia while somehow leaving the surroundings intact. Deciding to take the spell seriously, Triaxia started pulling itself back out of the spell's range. Issei's fist fit as he felt his hold over the Triaxia weakening. With 7-headed beast making its bid to escape, Issei knew that letting the Triaxia escape was not an option. The spell was the one-time thing. Not to mention, he doubted he would survive the Triaxia, who would directly attack them the moment the force with the black hole left it. Stealing his resolve, he mentally shouted, "Give me more power, guys, more!" "We can't, you idiot. This is the maximum output that you can use while still retaining your humanity. Any more and it will be years before you have human form again," Drake shouted back before the rest of the dragons nodding along. "That doesn't matter. If I fail today, it won't mean a thing if I have my humanity intact. At least I'll have years to get back my form if I succeed, so help me out. Channel as much energy as you can," he roared back at the dragons, who were silent for a moment after they just nodded and began channeling even more power into the attack. The rotation of the black hole started speeding up with suction, increasing all the white. Triaxia was once again firmly inside the pull of the hole. The pull was causing Triaxia to inch towards the black hole. Triaxia roared in irritation and began pulling back with even more vigor. This time, Issei felt himself being pulled towards the hole. In desperation, he shouted, "Apophis, it's time!" As if she had been there, Since the beginning, both Apophis and Lilith appeared before flying towards the Triaxia and began firing concentrated bursts of pure magical energy towards the Triaxia, hoping to not only damage the Emperor Beast of Apocalypse, but to also cause it to miss its footing. However, Triaxia wasn't known to be the strongest being in history without a reason. The damage, while extensive, was rather quickly healed thanks to Triaxia beyond godly regeneration abilities. Even 2 of its 7 heads started retaliating against both Apophis and Lilith, firing strong attacks back. Since Apophis and Lilith were separate, their attacks lacked the raw power that Apophis as a whole had. The stalemate between the 3 colossal giants was on for a long time, after which Issei felt his power leaving him and his exhaustion beginning to get the better of him. In a moment of weakness, he silently lost control over his spell before he immediately regained it. The small lapse was all the Triaxia needed to assert itself as the dominant one, and it had partially taken over the black hole and was using it to keep Apophis and Lilith in check, all while pulling Issei in inch by inch. Just when all the hope seemed lost in the sky and rumbled began to crack up a little. What now? Issei asked irritatedly. Things weren't going his way, now that the possible new annoyance was coming out. Apophis and Lilith both gave tiny smiles at him hearing the grumbled question. Both of them turned in a twin speech, with Apophis opening the conversation, said, "No need to worry. Issei-sama, Idiot Red, is here to help us beat Triaxia." Both of them finished simultaneously. Issei looked at them in disbelief for a moment before he heard the sounds crackling, getting stronger. Turning to look upwards, he just caught a sight in the sky, shattering and Great Red appearing out of the large dimensional gate. Looking at the majestic, as he knew the first time Issei laid eye on him in almost 3 years. Even Triaxia paid attention to the new arrival, knowing the celestial dragon god was less powerful than itself could match a hit for it. Great Red then circled around before he fired a beam at an unexpected Issei, whose eyes widened in fear as he saw the wave of magic coming towards him. He closed his eyes all while firmly holding onto his spell. He would keep on trying even if it meant death. However, instead of feeling any pain or even felt the blast, he felt warmth emanating from the beam as it hit him. As soon as the warmth died down, he felt his exhaustion leave him and his reserves starting to refill themselves at a very fast rate. What just happened? Issei wondered. It seems that Great Red used a tiny bit of his power to restore your peak condition. This will have quite the advantage as the fight heads into the finishing stages, Drake replied. That was very kind of him, Issei mentally said as he closed his eyes before opening them with a battle cry and his power rising dramatically. He then focused all of his power in one dramatic pull to control the spell from the Triaxia. Great Red, however, wasn't done. He looked towards the black hole and fired a beam towards it, and rather further enhanced it and made it faster and slightly easier to control for Issei. Triaxia was not at all pleased with Great Red's intervention, and began firing high-powered magical attacks at Great Red. Great Red in response blocked them with his shields before using his speed to get behind Triaxia, who was stuck and was now being pulled towards the black hole a little more quickly since Issei was rehabilitized, using more effort, and due to the fact that the black had been further enhanced by Great Red. Apophis and Lilith kept on attacking from the sides, keeping Triaxia distracted. Without a warning, Great Red moved in speeds that would put all of the gods to shame and whammed into Triaxia, causing the Beast of Apocalypse to lose its footing and fly straight into the black hole. Issei was surprised to note that Triaxia's healing abilities weren't that effective. While the black hole was effective in damaging the 7-headed beast, the damage wasn't extensive. Triaxia was also fighting and trying to get out. Knowing what to do, Issei pulled out one of his hands and summoned the true Longinus into his hand. Once the spear was in his hand, he pointed the spear at the black hole and mentally asked, "Guys, how long do I have before it change occurs?" "They will occur the moment you let go of your spell. Current the axis energy is leaving due to the spell. The moment it's released, the seal will be broken and the change will occur," Vitra answered, making a nod. Issei began the chanting. "O spear, the true holy spear which pierces through God. Suck the ambition of the king of domination sleeping within me and pierce through the gap of blessing and destruction. You announce the will and turn it to a glow. Seal up the black hole, Triaxia within it." The spear glowed in a beautiful blinding golden light that covered the whole area. The light seemed to be dull. Issei's senses as he stopped hearing Triaxia's roars of struggle. A few moments later, the light died down and Issei opened his eyes and found the black hole and the Triaxia along were gone. He couldn't even feel the pull of the black hole on his magic, showing him that was indeed over. Apophis and Lilith gave a small cheer before leaving to inform the others about what had taken place, while Great Red gave a loud roar that shook the entire area before he flew into the sky, disappearing into the dimensional gate. Issei sighed as he relaxed and let his energy exploded around him. He felt the release in the boosted, and soon different colored orbs left his body with blue, purple, black, gray, and green and white, all returning to their original counterparts, while red and dark and purple stayed behind before they took form of a giant red celestial dragon and a long serpent-like blackish purple dragon. Issei sighed and weakly smiled at the two partners before he fell unconscious, a deep pain in his body being the last thing that he remembered. And that is the end of chapter 31. Now, I am going to read the epilogue just because I know some people will want to know what happens after this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and read chapter 32, the epilogue. Chapter 32, the epilogue / aftermath. Time skip 3 weeks after the fight. In a cave far away from civilization, a figure growled as it lay on the dark floor. The figure had a bluish-white body, 2 large black wings, a purple tail, and a horn on a large snout. This was a dragon, or rather the draconic form of one of Issei Hyodo after he lost his last percentages of his humanity. Currently, he was being watched by both Vitra and Dreg. One of us should go and I'll form the alliance about his condition. The search parties are getting more and more desperate. I will tell them as soon as the partner wakes up. You and I both know they will assist upon moving him in somewhere else the moment they know that he is technically in a coma, Drake answered, effectively closing all of the debate. Though it will be hilarious when he finally goes back. I can imagine him getting a beating out of the hands of his mates, Drake continued with a snicker. Oh, there is no doubt about that. I can already imagine it. Though I will go inform all of his mates. You know it's cruel keeping them worried, Vitra said, finishing seriously. Drake sighed as he nodded before he took off into the air, flying towards the Alliance headquarters. The area he knew were currently Tiamat set in order to represent the newly formed Dragon faction. Drake then landed, taking the form of the tall, middle-aged man with striking green eyes and red hair. Sensing his arrival, Tiamat turned around and said, "What are you doing here, Drake?" Her tone was slightly bitter. Drake, however, did not mind, as he knew that she had forgiven him for her treasure he had accidentally destroyed. What she was angry about was him not telling her about the others that place Issei was currently resting in. I came here to tell you about how partner is faring. However, I will tell the rest of his mates together, so if you can summon them alone it will be appreciated, Drake lightly replied as he leaned against the wall of Tiamat's office. Tiamat's blue eyes widened a fraction before they returned to their normal level. She gave him a curt nod before she created a messenger circle and sent the message to Gabriel, LeFay, and Jean requesting their immediate presence in her office. The three blondes soon appeared in the office, with Gabriel appearing via a golden cross while LeFay and Jean arrived via transportation circle. Tiamat then turned to Drake and corked her eyebrow upwards before saying, "All of us are here, Drake. What did you want to tell us about Issei?" At Issei's mention, all 4 girls looked at Drake with a ferocious intensity that even made the great Welsh dragon sweat a bit. He then cleared his throat and said, "Partner's uncontinent will remain so for not a fixed time. The output of the draconic energy during the battle with Triaxia, that was way too much for his body to handle, and it gave away the last of his humanity vestige to become a pure dragon. Because of it, he had developed his own aura, which is rebuilding his body and soul. We don't know how much time it will take, but Vitra says that he should begin to at least stir around in the coming weeks." "I see. Will it be possible for us to see him?" Gabriel asked softly. "I'm afraid not. His aura is currently violate, and even after he wakes up, it will take a couple of years to get it under control. Until then, you will have to contend with letters and messages," Drake said with a shake of his head. "Oh, then will you inform us if anything happens, Drake?" LeFay politely asked. Her tone was sullen. "I will, and believe me, I know how it feels to lose a mate, and I promise you that I will tell you everything. However, I request that you do not inform anyone about what I have told you," Drake said, finishing in a serious tone. "We agree. We won't tell anyone what you share with us. After all, none of us would want to breach an Issei security," Tiamat quickly replied, cutting the possible arguments that were about to be by Gabriel. With a nod, Drake stood up before he jumped into the air and transformed into a celestial red dragon form and flying away. Several months later, so there's a scene break, we're going all the way later, several months later. It had been a number of months since Drake's meeting with Tiamat and the others. Over a course of time, Tiamat, Vali, and Tanin had worked to stabilize the Dragon faction and move on their own territory, all of which had been moving along slowly. The alliance as a whole was much more rigid and had no cracks, and was quickly bringing in more pantheons. True to Feature's predictions, Issei had been stirring for a few months, and according to him, he would wake up any day now. Currently, we find Dragon Vitra looking at the silently moving form of Issei. His aura was established, and he would be waking up any moment now. A few seconds later, Issei opened his mismatched yellow and green eyes before letting out a defeating roar. After a bit of stretch, he looked around only to find Dragon Vitra looking at him. Feeling their power along with his own instincts, roared at the foe to fight with him. However, his mind was still the same and quickly quashed that thought before he asked, "How long have I been here?" "Almost half a year, being honest. I expected it to be a bit longer, but your stubbornness seemed to have carried on to your aura," Vitra replied amusedly. "I see. What happens now that I can get back to the others? It would have been happening during the time I've been unconscious," Issei asked as he idly tested his new draconic form by standing on all 4 feet and lightly flapping his wings. The dragon faction is up and running in the lost ruins of Atlantis. We now have our own food supply and caves. Tiamat is acting head while Tanin is dealing with the diplomatic occurrences. Mid-Gransamore is sleeping once again. Yulong is acting as our Lycian with the Alliance, and me and Vitra have been taking care of you while Crom has been training some of the dragons who have expressed an interest in challenging him for his title as the 3rd heavenly dragon in the future. As for going back, you can't, well, at least not yet. You basically need to relearn everything about yourself, Drake said eventually. Relearn? How? Issei asked, pushing his irritation at not being able to see his mates. You are currently a mixture made up from power of 7 of the strongest dragons to ever exist. You are bound to have a few unaccounted abilities. In the coming 3 years, we will not only be able to rebuild your normal skills due to the power increase, but you will also be able to help mastering any new abilities along with bringing up control over your aura. After that, you will be able to go and take over the dragon faction and finally mate with your mates, Drake said, finishing with an amused stare that made a much younger dragon give a draconic equivalent of a blush. Alright then, let's get started. I know you're already warned of this, so I won't complain, Issei said, determined to get through his training quickly as possible so that he could finally go back to his mates. Time skip 3 years later. Standing on a hill, we find the 3 figures staring into the distance. The figure looked to be an Indian descendant, having a tall, skelly, muscular body with purple hair and scarlet eyes. The second one had crimson red hair, emerald green eyes, and a tall, wide, muscular form. The last figure had jet black hair with streaks of red, white, blue, and purple running through them. He had lean and muscular build along with the heterochromatic yellow and green eyes. The 3 were Issei, Drake, and Vitra. The past 3 years had been very fruitful for Issei. For one, he had learned that he had retained his affinity for ice and fire and had awakened a 3rd in air. Along that he had learned that his draconic aura was based on gravity and had developed a number of moves and techniques based on gravity. "We have come a long way, haven't we?" Issei asked with turning his head. "That we have, partner. Now what do we do, Drake?" "Now we set down a surprise," Issei said with a grin stretching his lips once he had the trio of dragons all disappeared respective elemental flashes. Scene break. At the headquarters of the Draconic faction, we find Tiamat working along with LaFay and Jean, all sorting through paperwork and whatnot. The addition of the Vali team, the core fighters of the hero faction, had been a boon. Even Gabriel visited the place daily to spend more time with her harem sisters. Currently, all 4 girls were enjoying a nice cup of coffee, making a small talk, only to be interrupted by the arrival of Drake and Vitra. Looking at them, Tiamat asked, "Drake, Vitra, what can I help you with?" "They are here to see me off, Tia-chan. I really hope I haven't been forgotten." The warm voice of Issei cut through the room, causing all 4 of the females to certainly stiffen. Gabriel, Jean, and LaFay slowly turned around to find a smiling visage of Issei, and all 3 of the flash of the girls came upon hugging him and the lights out of him. Issei chuckled merely before he released his black wings and wrapped them around the 3 of them the closer to him. Once the 3 girls let him go, they were one by one proceeded to kiss the soul out of him before tearily making a promise never to try something as reckless as he did the first the Triaxia and make sure that he would come back much sooner than the current time he took to return. Once he was done with greeting his blonde mates, he moved towards Tiamat, who was standing with her hands crossed under her prominent bust. "So you finally decided to come back, Tiamat asked sarcastically. Issei could only sheepishly chuckle at her tone. "I am really sorry. I tried my hardest to get my training done as soon as possible. Unfortunately, this was the least possible time possible," Issei said apologetically. What does that mean to me? I still didn't get the date you promised, and more, it was you were supposed to be the one in charge of this new faction, yet here I am who is stuck in here with a bloody paperwork. Do you? Tiamat retained it until she was cut off when Issei planted his lips on hers, when his hand shaking her around her waist and the other went around to stroke her long blue hair, gripping it, so he did. I'm sorry, and I promise I will make it up to you. We will go on as many dates as you want, and I'll take over the faction the moment you want me to, Issei said softly as he kissed her forehead and pressed against her, softly brushing it. See that you do, Tiamat said with a flustered face, causing Issei to give a warm chuckle. Looking around him, spotting his partners and mates, he knew that this was the sight that he would never want to get tired of. Things were finally starting to look up for him, and he really could not wait to see how things played out. There was no immediate threat of world destruction in the air. Time skipped 10 years later. Soft writing sounds penetrated in a well-furnished office with a male figure sitting on a table as his pen moved non-stop. This was Issei, and he currently doing paperwork. The past decade had improved the situation of the supernatural pantheons. The Dragon Pantheon was now regarded as the strongest, having several numbers who could easily make the top 10 of the world. Not only that, but due to Issei's old actions, he had quite a few alliances from around the world. He also married all of his mates and so far had 6 kids. Vali himself had moved in with Kuroka and was a proud father of 3. Drake and the other dragons were once again happy to terrorize the skies, were quite formidable guards. Issei brought out of the ravine when the door to his office was burst open and 6 blurs rushed in. 2 of them were blondes, while 3 of them were brunette, with the final one being a brunette. These were his kids. Issei smiled as his children chatted away about their days went, about the progress in their chaining and the soul into consequential things. He had a set of blonde twins with Gabriel, a boy and a girl being aptly named Mike and Yuri. He had 2 single brunettes boys children with Lefay and Jean, each. They had been named Itsuki and Mei, and finally a pair of twins with Tiamat, one of them being a brunette while the girl being brunette. They were named with draconic names Bahamut and Draconica. He was bought out of his monologue when Yuri said, "Dad, you promised that you would play with us today." "I did promise that, didn't I? Well, it seemed that your mothers will have to take time to complete this paperwork for me. Let me send a message to them and we will be off," Issei said as he created a communication circle and sent a voice message to his mates. After he was done, he once again turned to look at the eager faces of his children and asked, "Alrighty then, what do you guys want to do?" "Can you take us flying?" Itsuki asked hopefully, with all the 5 nodding along with puppy dog eyes out with full force. Chuckling to himself, he nodded before he followed his children outside. Once in the open air, he transformed into dragon form and lifted his children onto his back before taking off. As he flew, he said, "Alright guys, hold on tight. We're going to see Uncle Drake." As they cheered, Issei once again thanked any higher power involved that gave him a chance to enjoy the time with his family. It wasn't something that it would change anything in existence. And that was it. That's chapter 32, the epilogue, and that is the full entire series of What If Issei Was Betrayed and Snapped. This was the finale. I went all out for this one. I did a lot of reading. I don't know if this is going to be an hour-long one or something like that, but I'm really glad everybody was enjoying the series as much as I had fun reading it. So the next series will most likely be What If. It's either going to be What If Naruto Was Betrayed, or I might do a rebooted version of What If Issei Was Betrayed and just make it a lot more aggressive. But yes, I do plan on the Naruto Betrayed one, so please look forward to that. I'm going to put my all into that, so yeah. Again, thank you for all the support. It's been absolutely amazing journey on YouTube so far. I have 19,800 subscribers at this current time, and I can't thank you enough for all the support. And if you guys want to know, as soon as I warn my channel members a day before I upload. If you don't want to know what that is, right next to the subscribe button is a little blue button and it says join, and all you have to do is join it, and simply that's when you know when I upload. I'll let you know on my community tab. So again, thank you for all the support. Without further ado, Spartanic out.